All right. We are back here live from Radio Row with more guests. We have Miss Kimberly Archie joining us. Kimberly, how are you doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. What brings you to Radio Row?
Well, I'm the brain health advocate and activist for child rights in sports. So,
Okay.
what most people know me for is being the founder of the National Cheer Safety Foundation, making cheerleading a Title IX sport here in
Hmm.
California, as well as the person who wrote the legal arguments to take headers out of soccer to protect kids' brains.
Okay. Okay. And just talk, dive in a little bit more about that. Bringing a part of that or the leader of that foundation. Why is it so important for people to understand what that's about?
Well, I think that for so long we really focused on fandom and the game and winning
Yes.
as a society. We sort of lost focus that at the very grassroots of it, we have children playing.
Okay.
And as capitalism sort of seeped down to the youth sport level, we needed to up our game and elevate kids. And so I always say America loves sports, but we need to love kids just as much. So
Right.
not to advocate, sports any less, but to advocate, that kids are just as important. And so if we're not thinking about their health and safety and welfare, I mean, are we really doing what we're supposed to do as a
Yeah.
society? And we say sport is a reflection of society, so why aren't we going to start there when it comes to protecting kids?
Now, where does it start? Do you feel like it starts at home, or do you feel like it starts with the coaches, or is it the parents that really need to make sure that the coaches understand?
Well, I think in American capitalism, it's driven by litigation and insurance.
Okay.
So
Yeah, yeah,
I have a little
yeah.
bit more boring answer. I think that's where it starts, and I think that from that it trickles down from, the New York NFL office or governing bodies or the NCAA, and then it seeps into pop culture
Yeah.
and things like seeing it on Saturday Night Live when Charles Barkley did the skit about CTE and those types of things are what really bring about awareness. And then you have discussions at home where parents are starting to talk about concussions and knowing the right questions to ask their kids or their pediatricians from the top down. And everyone needs to be a it's just not on the kid to report. It's not just on coaches. It's everybody, but we really got to put responsibility on the people who make the money
Exactly.
because they benefit from it the most, and so it's their responsibility to do what they're supposed to do.
Now, I actually played soccer in college myself.
Okay.
So I was impacted by a couple of concussions. So was there a point in time where that really hit home for you, or when did you become passionate about this organization?
So my daughter did high school cheerleading, and she got injured on her cheerleading team practicing her back handspring on a trampoline. And I just saw that nobody had an emergency plan or knew what to do. And so I started tracking injuries, and that led me into the whole aspect of brain injury because you only have one brain. I mean, you can
Right.
break your arm and get through life with a metal plate in your arm, but brain damage is permanent. And so when I started doing research, and then I realized one of the things with soccer that was shocking to me is that, we heard a lot about PSI because of Tom Brady, right? But I didn't know that ball manufacturers didn't have to have a PSI range for safety. So saying like, right? Yeah, that's what I said as a mom. I'm like, huh? Like they sold a lot of these things. They don't have a standard where like if it's out of this standard, it's going to hurt you more.
Right.
They only have a performance standard. And so that's what, kind of clicked in my brain. And then I'm like, wait a minute. So kids as young as like 5 are hitting their heads with these balls with volunteer coaches.
It's like fill it up until it seems.
Until it looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, until you hit it well. And even at, the college level, there's a case currently right now. Haley Hodson was a Stanford volleyball player. And, she got hit in the head twice with the volleyball 10 days apart. Both concussions shouldn't have been play. And again, no standard for the volleyball for what PSI, only a standard for performance. And so, I think manufacturers need to be held to a standard, and most people don't realize that sports equipment isn't made specifically for kids or for women. So
we just passed National Women's in Sports Day. Talk a little bit about what that means for you.
Well, for me, I think like 2022 is exciting for women because I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And, you know, if women played sports, we were told we had to emulate men and look like them and play their games. And I feel like we're evolving out of that now. So I think that's exciting that women can be as feminine or masculine or a combination of both, and it's acceptable, and we celebrate them and create more opportunities for them, not less.
Where can people find out more information about the organization?
They can find us at nationalcheersafety.com, or you can find me at Kimberly Archie on Twitter. We have lots of heated debates on Twitter. If you want to roll over there and check out what we're talking about, it's always fun over there.
Now, a few years ago, I did a sports show in Kansas City that was titled "The Cheerleading Sport." I want to ask you, before we get out of here, I want to ask you your thoughts on this.
Well, I think that cheerleading is definitely a sport. It's something that I've been very passionate about. And I think that what most people don't realize is when we say cheerleading is a sport, we're not talking about dancing on the sideline to support a team.
Right.
We're talking about people who are athletes who are doing acrobatics and tumbling, which is really gymnastics, and also dance as well in a head-to-head competitions. And so we now have over 30 teams at the college level competing in what we call acrobatics and tumbling,
right.
Rightfully so. And it's an incredible, I mean, they have one of the biggest participations of any female sport at the college level. Baylor, Oregon, Quinnipiac, there's a lot of great schools involved in it. California made it a Title IX sport, and they compete at the state level. So you still have traditional sideline cheerleading, and then they are also able to compete with Title IX protection, meaning they have athletic trainers, and they have the protections that they're supposed to have in place. There's a huge difference between an activity and a Title IX sport. And so, cheerleaders were one of the first leadership positions acceptable for women in American society. It's difficult to find anything prior to cheerleading that women were allowed to stand in front of a crowd and tell men what to do.
Right.
So, give them some respect, regardless of whether you think it's a sport. I mean, think about the 50s when you were a woman standing in front of a crowd telling people what to do.
Right.
I know it's just a callback of a cheer, but as a woman, it was still really considered an honor to be able to have that, because we weren't seen as doctors or lawyers or any kind of leadership position whatsoever. So cheerleading really was the forefront for women's sports.
We really appreciate your time today. How can people contact you?
Again, the National Safety Foundation, so nationalcheersafety.com, or at Kimberly Archie on Twitter.
Okay, that's Miss Kimberly Archie. We'll be back here with more guests live from Radio Row in Los Angeles.